Okay, I think we have most of our attendees on the call right now. So, hi everyone. Thank you all for attending today's webinar Q&A on CICE's Call for Innovation for Wildfire Technology. This is an extremely important topic, and we're excited to support the innovation in the space. I think I speak for the entire team here at CIC when I say that we're looking forward to receiving your applications. We'll dive straight into the information at hand, but before we begin, I'll introduce myself. I'm Chantel Carden, the Carbon Management Lead here at the BC Centre for Innovation and Clean Energy, and I'll be co-leading our Wildfire Technology Call for Innovation with Ashley Callister, our Low Carbon Fuels Lead. And we have Evan Horvath, who will also be joining us as well as CIC's portfolio analyst, who you'll see later on to discuss our funding process. Next slide. So before we begin, I do want to acknowledge that our team here at CICE is based in the unceded territory of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. As we work to scale wildfire technology to commercialization, CICE is dedicated to creating an equitable and just energy transition. And I encourage everyone on this call to consider the role and equity Indigenous rights holders will have within the commercialization of wildfire solutions and the considerations around traditional ecological knowledge. Next slide. So welcome everyone to CICE's first call for innovation for wildfire technology. Some housekeeping rules. We are recording this Q&A and we will be following up with a link on our website for anyone that wants to re-review or share with colleagues following this webinar. We're also following this presentation with a Q&A at the end. So I encourage everyone to use the Q&A chat function, and we'll have myself, Ashley, and Evan here to provide answers to questions you may have at the end. Next slide. And the agenda for today's session. I'm going to briefly discuss the overview of the BC Centre for Innovation and Clean Energy. Ashley will discuss the Wildfire Call for Innovation and the opportunities for scaling solutions. Evan will highlight and walk everyone through CICE's funding process and parameters, which will then lead us directly into the Q&A portion of today's session, led by our Head of Marketing, Stacey Gorkoff. Next slide. So who are we? The BC Centre for Innovation and Clean Energy is an independent, not-for-profit corporation that leads early-stage investment to fast-track the commercialization of clean technology. CICE was established by the Government of British Columbia, Shell Canada, and Natural Resources Canada in October 2021. Through our investments, we bridge and leverage public and private sectors, providing BC innovators faster, easier access to non-dilutive investment and industry partnerships that they need to be global leaders in climate action. Our goal is to scale BC's most impactful clean energy solutions from Canada to the world. In BC, we are the largest early-stage climate tech funder and the first funders in BC to prioritize wildfire tech solutions across the entire value chain within our call for innovation. Our mission is led by our CEO, Sarah Goodman, who has been a large proponent for wildfire tech, and our team here in Vancouver, who are dedicated to pioneering and fast-tracking the commercialization of BC wildfire tech solutions to prosper in a net zero global economy. CICE acts as a key piece to build IP, promote diversity, create jobs, and drive a clean, prosperous economy for decades to come through our iterative due diligence processes. What makes our investment process unique and how we do what we do is that CICE undertakes a unique, intelligent, risk-taking investment framework, which maximizes outcomes and advances credible, world-class clean tech solutions across the TRL 4 to 9 range. The intelligence framework identifies and validates the most impactful and actionable pathways to net zero, which is backed by evidence-based reports, community engagement, and world-class subject matter expertise, which shape our calls for innovation. Another aspect to our unique funding framework is that CIC's investments to advance government adoption and scale breakthrough innovation faster by mobilizing collaboration between government, industry, investors, venture builders, academia, and Indigenous rights holders, and sending a positive signal to the market. And importantly, CICE de-risks investment in early-stage clean energy and climate innovation through validation of decarbonization pathways and public and private co-investment that unlocks critical capital to advancing clean tech innovation, which leads us to our portfolio to date. Next slide. So to date, CICE has allocated $23 million, which has unlocked a total of $145 million in total project funding. This equates to just over 1 megaton per year of potential greenhouse gas abatement. CICE's portfolio represents across our 4 identified focus areas: battery and energy storage, carbon management, low carbon fuels, and low carbon hydrogen. Next slide. To date, CICE has supported 37 projects within its portfolio representing all of these 4 focus areas. The slide represents all of the companies that CICE has invested in. And next slide. So before we dive in, out of general interest from our CICE team, where is everyone joining us from? And please answer via the chat function. We'll give a few moments for everyone to answer. That's great. We see a lot of BC-based entities and some from even outside of British Columbia. And very fast responses. From all over. This is great. Some from BC, some from the US, down in California, North Vancouver, Toronto. This is really good. This is exciting for us, and we're really excited to kind of see what innovators from the space come and join, hopefully one of our portfolios. So while the Wildfire Tech Call for Innovation prioritizes BC-based companies, we do want to emphasize that we will consider companies from outside of BC who apply with BC-based projects. Next slide. I'll now introduce Ashley, who'll be walking through the call for innovation for wildfire technology alongside the scope and the opportunities.
Perfect. Thanks, Chantel. It's cool to see so many people from not only across Canada, but I see some European countries in there as well. So thanks everybody for joining us today. I'm Ashley Callister. I'm the low carbon fuels lead here at CICE, co-leading this call for innovation. And building off of CICE's role in this space that was just covered, I'll focus a little bit more about this specific call for innovation on wildfire tech. Next slide, please. So in approaching a problem, CICE tends to first identify gaps and challenges within our focus areas. So as part of our intelligence framework, our recently released Catalyzing Carbon Dioxide Removal at Scale report identified opportunities to scale carbon dioxide removal by up to 1 gigaton. In this report, wildfire emissions were identified as one of the main sources of emissions. And I think everybody on this call is aware that wildfires are increasing in frequency and intensity. And the statistics from the last year are truly humbling. So from a BC lens, 26% of Canadian wildfire emissions originate from our province. And we saw a 42% increase in wildfires across BC. From a Canadian perspective, a total of 2.3 gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalent were released by Canadian wildfires last year. This is over 3 times the entirety of Canadian economic emissions. But the way we see it, where there is a significant challenge, there is a significant opportunity. Next slide. BC is uniquely positioned to have an advantage in this space by addressing the challenges associated with wildfires, as unfortunately we do have quite a bit of experience in this sector. However, this does translate into vast experience across the life cycle of a wildfire. In addition to CIC's CDR report identifying wildfire emissions as a key area of opportunity, last year CICE ran 2 specific calls for innovation, one focused on measuring, monitoring, and verification for carbon management, and another focused on forest residue management. It did become clear from both of these calls that wildfire management was a topic that could not be ignored, and that BC has a unique combination of technical ambition as well as regional resiliency with traditional and cultural knowledge that has proven to be effective. So there's an opportunity to harness these strengths to accelerate innovation to manage wildfire impacts on responders, communities, and ecosystems, as well as combat rising emissions associated with annual fires, demonstrated by the graph there on the right. There's also an opportunity to catalyze collaboration across the entire value chain because everyone has a vital role to play in tackling this issue. And ultimately, there is an opportunity for BC to become a leader in advancing rapid deployment of wildfire solutions to not only make a difference here in the province, but also to have a global impact. Next slide. With this in mind, CICE is putting out a call to action. The challenges identified and the opportunities discussed show that innovation is definitely needed within this sector. In scoping this call, we connected with players across the value chain, including Indigenous rights holders, academia, associations, government, and industry, each playing an instrumental role in wildfire management and developing and scaling novel wildfire tech solutions. To produce material interventions, we are providing up to $3 million in non-dilutive investment through this call for innovation. We know there are already innovators out there developing game-changing solutions, and we look forward to hearing your questions today and hearing about your innovations moving forward. Next slide. So, without further ado, let's get into the process and parameters for this call for innovation. There are a number of frequently asked questions, and we did receive your questions ahead of time, so we will address those first before moving into a live question and answer period. So I'll pass it back to Chantel for the first question.
So who can apply and what does CICE prioritize? So we look at projects proposed in the call, and they must be delivered within British Columbia. And the priorities will be given to projects where the solution regarding the project location and company are based within British Columbia, and that CICE will prioritize solutions that are readily scalable and demonstrate co-benefits that go beyond the technology and the GHG emission benefits that will be identified within the application. And priority will also be given to projects that exemplify Indigenous opportunity and involvement and really consider economic reconciliation within their commercialization and development. Next slide.
So in terms of what solutions are eligible, the call is titled Wildfire Tech, but we understand tech to be a very broad definition. So in this call, we will look at both technology and business model innovations that enhance the commercial deployment of wildfire management measures. We are including three main areas for innovation within this scope. Those are prevention, mitigation, and adaptation. So in terms of examples of prevention solutions, it could include predictive modeling tools, proactive land management practices, and fire-resistant materials. In terms of mitigation technologies, potentially early wildfire detection systems, communication and information technologies, firefighting technologies, spread halting, sustainable fire retardants, and the development of specialized equipment. And on the adaptation side, this could be solutions to increase forest and community resiliency, post-fire recovery, as well as business model innovations to integrate climate change adaptation strategies into land management practices. So just to reiterate, we are looking for solutions that also integrate additional carbon reduction into projects, promote ecosystem restoration and biodiversity conservation, and enhance community resilience and socioeconomic benefits. And project activities may include, but are not limited to, demonstrations, pilot projects, innovative implementations, as well as a novel linkage of existing system components. Next slide.
So what makes a good project within the CICE perspective? Projects that propose scalable innovation that can be replicated to address wildfire impacts beyond British Columbia is something that we will highly consider with regards to the application process. And this is we are looking for use of export beyond British Columbia through global potential. And projects with robust environmental, social, and economic impacts supported by effective governance within their company level will be highly considered within our investment process. Next slide.
So in terms of the process and funding for applying, the call for innovation is actually open for expressions of interest starting today until August 7th at 5 p.m. The expression of interest portal can be found on our website. It consists of a short written application along with a 5-minute video that describes your proposed project. We promise we are not judging the video based on production value. Our intent is to make the expression of interest as accessible as possible. So proponents who are invited to advance to stage 2 will be notified on August 28th. From there, a detailed proposal will be submitted covering the project, company, and innovation in depth. Detailed proposals do go through a rigorous due diligence process that involves an in-depth feasibility, technical, financial, climate, and legal review. Investment decisions are made by CICE's investment committee, and successful applicants will be notified on November 1st. The final stage of engagement involves the signing of an agreed upon contribution agreement, where successful projects will be announced at the end of November this year. The intention being that these projects are ready and starting prior to next year's wildfire season. Next slide. So I'll take a pause here to do a quick poll of the audience. So based on the information provided thus far and the scope of the call, are you planning to apply for the call for innovation? We'll give it about 30 seconds. Perfect. See some responses rolling in. Okay. So I see the responses slowing down, so maybe we can end the poll there. So the majority of you on the call are attending to apply, which is fantastic news for us. In terms of those of you that are not sure / still deciding, hopefully a little bit more information on the eligibility and the parameters will help sway your decision so that we can connect with you further. So with that in mind, I will pass it over to Evan Horvath to take us through CIC's funding process and parameters. Evan?
Thank you, Ashley. I have seen a couple of questions if this recording will be available in the chat. I just wanted to say yes, the recording and slides will be available. Okay, let's get started with a few more questions and answers. Next slide, please. So what is the maximum amount of investment per project? First off, we look at this from the total project cost, so we won't fund more than 50% of the total project. CICE intends to invest in several projects of different sizes with a total being $3 million. But our average investment size currently in our portfolio is $750,000 with a pretty wide range from 150 to 1.5 million actually. Next slide. When can the non-dilutive investment be used? The funding agreement for the award projects will be put in place by the end of November, as mentioned, and the projects must start within six months of that signing. The projects, or once the PFA has been signed, the project duration has to be within 2 years of, or to completion. And then eligible expenses only occur after the funding agreement is in place. So I did see a question in the chat there of if we would include any costs from before, those would not be included in the funding eligible expenses, but in some cases could be included in the project value. If there's any specifics around that, we're happy to follow up and get into a little bit more detail offline. And the funding schedule will be specific to the project and aligned with the project spending and milestone completion. So in reality, it's a case-by-case basis, and we're trying to align the cash flows of our disbursements with the cash flows or the outflows within the project. Next slide. How can the investment be used? So we think about this from a project's perspective, so costs that are relevant to the project. This could be salaries, consultants, contractors, project managers that are all direct to the project. Within the demonstration, it could be site costs, operating costs, pilot production, prototyping, integrating system components, scaling up of manufacturing. There's a number of others, but in terms of generalizing, just think, is it directly related to the project and the outcomes that we're looking for within that project? Now, on the flip side, next slide, please. Here are a few that would be outside of the scope of eligibility for our funding. Would be day-to-day business operations, unrelated purchase of capital equipment and leasehold improvements, furniture and equipment for routine business, advertising for the business or promotional activities, human resources. One that's not listed here would be markups in certain scenarios. That's, well, in all scenarios, that's not included, but in certain scenarios, it may seem like it would be. So, but again, happy to follow up with more detail if you have some specific questions on what's eligible. Next slide, please. What are the rules on stacking limits and leveraging funds from other programs? So first and foremost, we don't have any requirements within stacking. CICE investment can be stacked with funds from other programs and leveraged to obtain additional funding. We do consider projects with strong private funding and commercial support to be looked upon favorably. But I do just want to add a caveat to that, that in some cases, if project value is very significant and CICE's proportion is relatively insignificant for the project, we also consider the total impact of our dollar and may look at projects where our dollar has a significant impact or a more significant impact in that case. But again, it's often case by case, and it really depends on what the applications look like. Next slide, please. Can organizations have more than one application or project supported with CICE? Yes, we do allow multiple projects, but these projects must be independent to be active at the same time. So one organization can apply at the same time for different projects and have multiple supported projects, but there needs to be independent activities and independent results or outcomes that we're looking for. And if those outcomes are kind of in line with one another or start to overlap too significantly, we would actually still accept both projects, but they would have to be separated. So they can't overlap at all in terms of timing. So what we would ask is that you apply once for the first portion of the project, and then the part that overlaps, once the first project's complete, we would then ask you to apply again for follow-on funding, and you would qualify then. Next slide, please. What is the structure of collaborative projects? CICE accepts projects led by a consortium with a single lead organization as an applicant. So there's only one applicant lead, but we're more than happy to see who else you're working for or working with within the project. If there are multiple organizations, we encourage you to submit the application through the organization that is developing the innovation. We do support projects that have academic institutions in the consortium, but again, request that the non-academic organizations submit the application. And really, if you're looking for who's the best candidate, it's the one that is developing the innovation. Next slide, please. So before we wrap up today, a question for the audience. What is the estimated size of the projects that you're looking to apply with? I see a question there. You mean budget? It would be the total project cost, not the amount of funding that you're looking to apply for. We'll give a couple more seconds here. Okay, closing in 5, 4, 1. Awesome. So it looks like a pretty even distribution between 250 to 500. Awesome. That's great to see. We look forward to seeing the applications. Okay. Now I will pass off to Stacy, who's going to field some questions from the audience in the Q&A.
Great. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Wow, we have a lot of questions. I'm going to tell you right up front, if we do not get to your question, do not panic. We'll make sure that there is an email that you can notify and send your question directly to. For those that we know who the questions came from, there's some anonymous ones as well. We will always follow up with you. This is not your last chance to get it out there, but let's go with the ones that we have here, and we'll go through as many as we can. The first one, are academic institutions eligible to be the prime applicant with a consortium of industry partners? Who would like to take that one?
I can jump in there. So
Thanks, Evan.
while they would, so academic institutions would not qualify as a lead applicant for this intake, but they would qualify to be a project partner, and we encourage them to partner with innovators. So what we would like to see in the application in this case would be that the innovator applies and they're the lead applicant, but they can partner with an academic institution or other institution as well.
Okay. Another question, what matching funding sources are eligible? And some of the examples, NSERC, MyTax, etc. Also, and this is an add-on, I think we can do both at once, will in-kind contribution, materials, equipment, expert salaries, etc., be considered as matching, or does it have to be cash?
I can jump in there again. So in terms of MyTax and all the other examples, we accept stacking funding with all of them. So no problems there. In terms of in-kind contribution, we've found that in reality, in-kind contribution can be a little bit complicated. So I don't want to give a straight answer here. Generally, it's preferred that it would be a cash equivalent to our investment dollar, but then we would also include in-kind in the total project cost that we're assessing. But I would really encourage you to reach out if there's some specifics that you want to discuss.
Great.
Yeah, and I'll just add there as well that we don't have any limitations on stacking funding, but definitely check with the other institutions or organizations that you're receiving from, especially from federal sources.
Okay. We've had a few questions about clarifying the investment amount. Is the total fund 3 million, or does the 3 million reflect the top end of an individual investment by the fund into a company? Is one of them. And then the other one is, of course, how many companies is CICE planning to fund?
Yeah, I mean, happy to jump in. It is 3 million total for this opportunity, so spread across multiple projects. We don't have a specific size limit for you to apply for like maximum funding amounts, but as Evan mentioned earlier, our average check size is around 750,000, really depending on each individual project. So we're likely going to fund between 3 to 5 projects through this call for innovation, hoping to in the future see a bigger opportunity to be able to maybe scale this call up or provide more support, but at this point it will be 3 million across multiple.
Okay. Another question, must our innovation include our own IP? In other words, if we supply a solution that has the manufacturer for Wildfire that would specifically work in BC, especially with Indigenous groups because of our relationships, would that qualify? Or must we add our own IP?
Yeah, so in this case, preference would be for the innovator to apply. So if you're developing your own IP, that's often going to be a strong application, but there's obviously a wide range of scenarios that, I mean, we don't want to just create two distinct buckets of like developing IP and not developing IP. And we recognize that there's a lot of different scenarios within there. So we would still, of course, encourage you, and you definitely qualify if you're not developing IP. It's more how we can support you in making the application competitive as well. So we would encourage you to reach out again, and we would be more than happy to discuss the details around that.
Okay. Is there any benefit to submitting the EOI earlier rather than at the deadline?
I'll jump in and answer that. There is no benefit to applying earlier than the deadline. It's obviously, of course, up to you and your company and when you want to apply, but we will be reviewing all EOIs at the end of the EOI process. So when you submit will not make a difference with regards to our decision-making and our process moving forward with regards to the EOI application.
Okay. In the case of a field test demonstration, could it occur in any other province or even the US should there be an advantageous opportunity?
Great question. Once again, we're focused on supporting BC-based projects. So if there are innovators that are working in the space, we are looking at outside companies working within BC for BC-based projects.
Okay. Will any shovel-ready projects be accepted earlier than the August 2024 close? I think that's another question that's in alignment with the earlier one, but Chantal, maybe you want to address that one more time.
Yeah, absolutely. So with regards to projects that are already occurring, we are only looking at projects that have, I guess, incurring cost following the application process. So we don't look back at what's already been done, and we're not looking at considering projects at an earlier stage. So all projects are being reviewed at the end of the UI process, and we will only look at projects that are actually occurring within our contribution agreement dates that we agree on with those proponents.
Excellent. There's a few questions about R&D. One that says, how do you define R&D for early stage TRL 4 and 5? And then another one that kind of ties into that, and that's, they saw the studies in R&D are non-eligible costs for the funding. Can we elaborate? So maybe we need some clarification around that.
Sorry, can you just repeat the second half of that question, Stacey?
Sure. I think someone was noting that they saw that studies in R&D were non-eligible costs for the funding.
Right.
There was some need to elaborate on that. And the question earlier than that was asking about the definition of R&D for early stage TRL 4 and 5.
Right. So the way that we look at R&D, I'll answer that portion up front, is, I mean, of course, in this space, there will be an iterative process and you're kind of developing technology throughout. But if it's an R&D, like exploration project, then it's considered to be not, or it's not qualified. The reason for that is because at that stage, there's no thesis or there's no strong demonstration that it's scalable. And part of our mandate is to support scaling the innovation. Now, I think I can get into a little bit more detail around kind of like what that definition is at, say, TRL 4 and 5. Now, if some components have a, let's call it, well, we could say feed stage or front end engineering design. Again, generally, if the whole project is based on that feed stage or R&D, it would not qualify. There's certain scenarios where we would support it being included as one milestone within the project so that you're progressing beyond the TRL 4 or 5 and really finishing in the TRL 6 or 7 or even later. So I hope that answers that question thoroughly.
Great. And if it doesn't, by all means, again, reach out to us and we'll try our best to have that conversation. And on that note, actually, someone asked, can we have a call prior to applying?
Absolutely. I think the best way would be to email one of us and we would be able to get you in touch with the relevant party. And then more than happy to have a call or a discussion with you.
Okay, here's a question about the consortiums applying. Do we need support letters for EOI stage?
Support letters are not necessary for the EOI stage. However, if we get into this detailed proposal stage, then we do encourage you to apply with some letters of supports within your appendix of your application, of course.
Okay, can multiple projects be funded at the same time? Clarity around that, please.
Yeah, happy to clarify that. So multiple projects can be funded at the same time, but they really need to be independent with independent outcomes. Otherwise, they need to be not funded at the same time. We would look at funding them following the first project, but they need to be separated, and we would encourage that application to occur after you finish the first project.
Okay. Here's another one for you, Evan, and Kyle is actually calling you out, which is quite lovely. Evan mentioned follow-up funding. What is the amount for the next phase of funding?
That is a great question. So at this point, it is a little bit undefined. And so we want to just say, I mean, there's other scenarios where a company may fit within the wildfire technology focus, as well as some of the other focus areas or calls that we are completing as well. And in that scenario, that's kind of how I'm answering these questions is you may have projects that fit within multiple focus areas, but they're not overlapping. So we can support those all at the same time. Now, with respect to follow-on funding, we still are looking at deploying a significant amount of capital in the next 3 years, but our focus and where we're prioritizing that deployment is going to evolve over time. And that really leans on Chantel and Ashley's strong research and where we think the biggest opportunities will be moving forward. So that could look like another wildfire call, or it could look like another more specific focus, and it really depends on what that research looks like.
Thank you. Okay, here's a good one. Similar to NRC IRAP, is funding cash flowed monthly for project labor? And 2, can funding be applied to past company investment in labor?
Yeah, happy to jump in there again. So in terms of past costs, they do not qualify for CICE funding. And sorry, what was the first question there?
The first question was whether or not the funding cash is flowed monthly for project labor.
Right. Yeah, so it does not flow monthly. It flows on a milestone basis where we define the milestone. And actually, we work quite collaboratively with the companies to define what that timeline looks like. But as I kind of touched on a little bit earlier, was we're really trying to line up those inflows of our capital with the outflows of the project, and making sure that those line up is often the best strategy. There's some scenarios where that's not the case, but we're working collaboratively with the applicants to develop what that looks like.
Okay. Our tech is purpose-built for wildfire response, but is not specifically clean tech itself. Do we still qualify?
I mean, we'd probably have to take a little bit of a deeper dive into exactly what you're proposing, but off the top of my head, as long as it aligns with our prevention, mitigation, or adaptation focuses within the scope of this call, I would say it would still qualify. It doesn't have to be a specific clean technology focus. We are including other aspects or definitions of innovation as a potential application for this call.
Okay. Is development of longer-term climate forecasting software / models eligible for this funding? And that includes AI and ML.
I think that yes. I think we're all looking to provide the same answer. I would say that definitely falls within scope. Of course, again, with understanding the long-term impacts and how you're looking to monitor and ground truth and that sort of thing, in addition to the proposed project, would be something we would like to explore with you. But in terms of eligibility, absolutely, that would be eligible.
Okay, and then Ashley, I think this is another one for you. Are projects utilizing wildfire waste wood biomass for value-added products eligible?
I would say yes, as long as it is on the innovative step is clear. So obviously fiber utilization and really getting the fuel out of the forest is a preventative measure to addressing wildfires in BC. And then it also could be considered on the post-fire recovery side as well. So as long as it does align with those definitions, the innovative step is obvious. I would consider that as part of the application as well.
Okay. Here's an important one. as well. I mean, they're all important, but this is, I think this will apply to a lot of people that are on this call. We are implementing novel IP to help protect our territory. IP has been used for military application, but not for wildfires. Should the band who is implementing use or the IP developer apply?
If there is a use case for wildfire emission mitigation, adaptation, and prevention, I think we would accept the application, and we would have to further look into what that IP development actually looks like with regards to wildfire emissions.
Okay.
I would agree, but I'm going to add on a little point there in terms of the applicant, whether it's the band, I assume that would be like an Indigenous band or the innovator. In that case, actually, I don't think we would have a preference. We're actually very open to working with both. And so I think at that point, it would be more like who is leading the project, who is more engaged. I mean, we encourage collaborations like this, and we'd love to see that. So yeah,
Okay.
looking forward to seeing the application.
That's great. If we are an Alberta company with projects and partners in BC, would we be able to submit? There are a few of those questions that are still popping up, so maybe just a little bit more clarification on that. Be good.
Yeah, so I think I've seen a couple questions pop up as well from abroad, and I know there's some people from Europe and outside of Canada as well. So I'll try and give a thorough response to this one. So essentially, we require economic and or social benefit to BC within the projects we fund. The company can be based in BC or the projects can be based in BC, but it comes down to the economic and social benefit to BC. Beyond that, that does not necessarily require a BC incorporated company, although it's encouraged. It's not a requirement. It could also be a project based in BC operated by a federally incorporated organization. Applying from outside of Canada is more challenging, and we would encourage you to reach out to really flesh out the details. But we'd be open, and we'd be open to discussing kind of alternatives and how to move forward. I think there's two options that we've seen in the past would be incorporating in BC and having a subsidiary here, or have a project partner that is based in BC be the lead application, where you're a project partner from outside of Canada. But again, definitely encourage you to reach out and we can discuss in more details if that is not clear.
Excellent. Thanks, Evan. That's good clarification. There is someone that is asking again, is there an interim approval or rating for a proposal? If we can meet a shorter timeline. And I think, Chantel, that ties to the answer that you gave. Maybe we can clarify just a little bit more on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're reviewing EOIs at the end of the EOI process. So we know that we're accepting applications during wildfire seasons. The intent of this call is to essentially allow for projects come the stage 2 due diligence and the contribution agreements coming to an end in November. We allow for projects, a mandate for projects to start within 6 months. So the intention behind this to actually have projects starting next wildfire season. So we know that the due diligence process is completed at the end of the EOI process and then going into stage 2 until November. So that is the intention. So no considerations will be given until the end of the EOI process, which is in August.
Great. Could you speak more on the proposal process? Will there be a stage with a live demo ahead of the final decision? And if so, what would the demo entail? Ash, do you want to give that a go?
Sure, yeah, happy to talk about the process. So as we mentioned, the EOI is very simple. So a 5-minute video in which you could, include a little clip of the technology or the project to really demonstrate where it's at the moment. As part of the detailed due diligence during phase 2, we accept a detailed proposal that really goes through each of the different aspects of the project, of the company, and really the proposed technology or innovation. At that point, we don't require any type of demonstration in person, but I think that having that ready, or if you're at that stage, it definitely would benefit your project, considering we're looking for these real scalable and ready to move into commercialization pieces of the puzzle. So to answer your question, it's not required. We're not going to ask for that, but if you have that, we would definitely be interested in exploring a little bit further with you during that detailed phase of evaluation.
All right. Are companies more at an advantage of receiving this grant, or can not-for-profits receive this grant as well?
Happy to jump in there. So not-for-profits definitely still qualify for funding. And in that case, I mean, the difference between a not-for-profit and a for-profit entity is not considered in our application. It's more when we start looking at, say, government or academic institutions where we would prioritize an applicant or the partner within that project to apply who is maybe a nonprofit or for-profit entity.
Okay. Are there regional quotas around the province for funding?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, no, they're not regional quotas, and we don't mandate that we fund amongst all the regions within British Columbia, but we do try to support regional-based projects across British Columbia within our portfolio. So we're not mandating that we support projects throughout BC, but we do try to balance out projects throughout BC with regards to the EOIs and the applications. So it really depends on the projects that come in with regards to the wildfire mission call. So it's a dependent answer. Hopefully that was clear, but we're not really specifically looking for regions. We're actually looking more for technology solutions, but we do try to consider looking across British Columbia for solutions.
Okay. Understanding separate projects, would two different innovations to address the wildfire issue be allowed to apply simultaneously if the projects are obviously separate?
Absolutely, we would accept both. Can't say that both would get funding as we only have a limited amount of capital, but definitely encourage you to apply with both, and there's no problems there as long as, again, just making sure that it's clear that the activities or the outcomes that we're looking to achieve are different. Actually, in this case, it actually sounds like the outcome would be the same in that it's GHG reduction, but they're using completely different technologies that would also qualify. So good clarification there.
Great. Here's another one for clarification. Would a technology that might be a TRL 678 level be eligible to reach the commercialized stage? In other words, tested in a live wildfire scenario? I see lots of heads nodding. Does anybody want to add a comment?
I mean, yes, it would.
Okay.
That's the short answer to the question. And really, just to reiterate, like, we are looking for solutions that will have a large impact. So if you're at the stage where you've done the demonstration and it's able to be replicated in various regions, that's fantastic. We would absolutely support that. We consider TRLs 4 to 9 in terms of funding.
Thanks, Ash. Here's another one. What aspects of the project should be highlighted in the 5-minute application video? Can you please clarify?
Sure, happy to jump in. So just for clarity's sake, we will have an application guide posted on our website. I think it's up there already. So I invite everybody who's considering to apply to go and read through that first, because it does reiterate all of the eligibility requirements and it does outline the exact specifications that we're looking for in terms of what to include in the video, as well as alignment with our mandate, etc. But basically, the 5-minute video will go through a summary of your innovation, as well as your proposed plans to either implement or scale the innovation, any partners that are involved within the project, any IP that's being developed with the project, any co-benefits with the project, and really the key aspects that we will need in order to evaluate, because we understand that 5 minutes is a pretty condensed video, but we're asking that if you can communicate clearly what you're intending to do within the project within that time frame, that you're hitting those really key aspects. So if you're thinking about it from even a funder's perspective, what someone would need to feel confident in the project to move forward is what we're looking for.
Okay. Here's another question in regards to the funding application process. If only funding 50% of total project costs, are applicants required to submit a total budget in the proposal? Must all funding sources be disclosed?
Yes, to both of those questions. So we do require that you outline the whole scope of the project and all the costs that are going into that project, as well as how it's being funded. If you think about this from a funding perspective as well, like we kind of need to do our due diligence in terms of making sure that we understand what our money is going towards, but also that there's sufficient planning in place to make sure that the project has the ability to move forward. But if there's any specific scenarios, I'm having a hard time thinking of anything that would fall outside of that. But again, more than happy to talk in more detail offline, and hopefully we can clarify that if this answer wasn't quite enough.
Okay. Do public companies qualify, for example, a TSX company, venture company?
They would qualify. We're really looking to see what the innovation outcome is and like the technology advancements. More generally, we see a lot of innovation at earlier stage companies, but that's not to say that there's not innovation happening at bigger companies. And if there is something that's really going to move the needle in technology advancements within this space, by all means, we encourage you to apply.
Okay. Are the costs of IP patents covered?
Yes, those are a cost that would be included.
Okay. Our solutions are for early detection of wildfire in real time. How early do you think it has to be? What is the time frame?
I mean, we're looking for as early as possible, so would be curious to dig into it a little bit more, but we don't have a specified time frame. Really as early as possible is what I would say.
Okay. Are you defining wildfires as only forest fires or also bushfires and peat fires?
We would consider those as well. So we're looking for anything that essentially is part of the wildfire value chain. So I would consider that. And I think Ashley and Evan would also consider that. So we'd be happy to look at that application with regards to the EOI process.
Okay. Do manufacturers for wildfire, forest fire fighting equipment qualify?
Short answer, yes.
Great. Do we have to expense the cost first and then ask for reimbursement if we are approved? Or can we ask for fund disbursement before we expense?
Yeah, happy to jump in here. There are very specific and unique scenarios where we can advance funding, but I would say do not anticipate that. And there's pretty strict rules around that on our end. So generally how this works is you incur the costs of the project, which is kind of part of the reason why we like to see additional funding, is to make sure that the cash flow needs are met. And then when you reach a milestone and you've completed the activities required within that milestone, then we disperse our portion of that funding. And the process within there would be a milestone report where you disclose the costs that were incurred, and we go through kind of like the outcomes and the activities that were completed and the goals that were reached as well.
Alrighty. Here's one that's come in a couple of times, and I think this is interesting. Can we get a list of the attendees if we wanted to collaborate with them? And I think overall, we're not allowed to share that list of attendees, unfortunately. But I am wondering, and here's my question to the CICE team, what can we do to help support collaboration in this environment?
It's a good question. Unfortunately, I don't think we can share the list of attendees just for privacy purposes, but maybe we could set something up on the website where it's a voluntary situation. You could put your contact information in if you're looking to make connections and kind of what the connection you're looking to make would consist of, but we'll have to chat about that internally, unfortunately. And between the three of us, if there's someone specific or a company specifically or an organization that you're looking to connect with and they're within our network, we're happy to provide that introduction as well.
Yeah, there is, and for those of you, yes, we would definitely never share this list. Unfortunately, it's just not something we can do. But I love the idea of perhaps setting up a voluntary list or, being able to help make connections if we see them fit. It's great. There was a question, and Chantel, I believe this is a follow-up to your answer. Would that mean urban wildland interface fire be considered? So these are the fires that are in urban areas that were started or influenced by wildfire.
Potentially, yes, depending on the technology that you're applying with. Now, the focus is on wildfire emissions and mitigating and preventing and adapting for wildfires overall. So it really would depend on the application, the technology that you're proposing.
Excellent. Alrighty. And then here's one that I think is, I'm not sure I totally understand the question, so may need some clarification. But you're at a TRL 6 stage, but pre-certification, third-party certification is not complete yet, and you're only looking to commercialize. Is it okay to apply?
Definitely, we encourage you to apply in that case. So again, TRL 4 to 9, if you're at 6 or 7, still lots of room to progress within that range as well. And getting certification may only be one of the challenges that you're facing. It may be the only challenge that you're facing, but if we're seeing that there's sufficient technology advancement, then that's really what we're prioritizing, and we're more than happy to support.
Great. This one is an interesting one as well. How many milestones will there be for a solution, and will that be based on TRL?
That is a good question and not based on TRL. It really depends, and it's a case-by-case scenario, but we think through it. I mean, I've mentioned this a little bit, but we think through the milestones on a cash flow basis primarily. So we're trying to align the inflows with the outflows and making sure that that makes sense, and we're supporting the success of the project in that regard. But with that in mind, there are scenarios where we want to reduce the number of milestones or increase the number of milestones. And that really depends, but we will work on that kind of collaboratively with the applicant to make sure that it makes sense for us as well as them.
Excellent. We are coming very, very close to time here, so I will take this last question. And Jasmine, maybe we can forward the slides on to the last one with the contact info on there for those folks that still have questions that we were unable to answer. But for this last one, if we are stacking funds from other grants, do they need to be available at the time of signing the funding agreement, or can they be slated to arrive during the course of the project?
Yeah, that's so how we would look at that is we would want to see it included if it's confirmed, but you don't actually need to have the funding up front. So for example, my tax is kind of a reimbursement, or sorry, my tax, I'm not sure. I was thinking of, sorry, SHRED. SHRED is on a reimbursement basis, but you can kind of estimate how much you're going to qualify for. So we would want to see that you're expecting a certain amount of SHRED credits. But of course, you don't actually have that money yet. It'll come later. So that's no problem for us. It's more just kind of making sure that we understand what the inflows and outflows are for the project.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Wow, this has been really, really great. There's been so many great questions that have come through. Thank you to everyone that has taken time to join us today and for taking such an active interest in this this call. And thank you to the CICE team. You know, as usual, you have been super honest and super open with your answers. Always appreciated. And if there's anything else that you would like to ask the team, the email is there. Please check out the website and you will see the applicant guide. You will see the application form. Everything that you need will be there, along with the recorded version of this webinar. So thank you. And I hope you all have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for joining, everyone.
Thank you. Look forward to the applications.
Bye-bye.